Advent is the season of longing for Jesus to come back, longing for God to keep his promises. But let's just be honest, longing, or to use another word, waiting, it's hard. Because the longer you wait for something to happen, the harder it is to believe that it actually will. The encouragement of Advent is that we are to have confidence in the second advent of Jesus, Advent meaning arrival, because we have confidence in the fact that he came the first time at Christmas. But even with that, holding on to hope is challenging. It's not easy as followers of Jesus to have faith in the things that we long for during Advent. Nobody likes to admit that they deal with doubt when it comes to their faith, especially around Christmas. But let me encourage you this Advent season. Just because you have big questions, or just because you wrestle with doubt sometimes, doesn't mean that you don't have faith, or you are somehow faithless. Because listen, faith doesn't equal certainty, and doubt doesn't equal faithlessness. Someone's faith is revealed more by their faithfulness, not by their claim to certainty. Someone can claim certainty and yet not be faithful to the truth of God that they claim to be so certain about. Today, much of the church world remembers the Apostle Thomas, who is often known for his doubts. In fact, you may have heard of him referred to as Doubting Thomas. I hate that. I hate that he's referred to as Doubting Thomas. I hope that by the end of this, you'll no longer remember him as Doubting Thomas. Thomas is most remembered by the account of John chapter 20. The disciples minus Thomas were gathered in a room behind a locked door out of fear. And the resurrected Jesus appeared to them and showed them his hands and his side and said, "Peace be with you." And the disciples share the news with Thomas, that they say that we have seen the Lord, but he responds with, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And you know what? I get it. He wanted to experience what the other 10 had experienced, wouldn't you? But then a week later, the disciples, this time including Thomas, are behind a locked door once again. And once again, Jesus appears before them. And once again, he declares, "Peace be with you." I love what happens next. Thomas didn't ask Jesus to show him his hands and his side. The disciples didn't tell Jesus that this is what Thomas requested. No, Jesus, being Jesus, knew Thomas's doubts and questions, just like he knows my doubts and my questions, and just like he knows yours. And knowing Thomas's doubts, Jesus showed him his hands and his side. And I love how personal it is. It reveals something to us about the nature of God. Jesus wasn't mad at Thomas. He desired for him to see him and place his faith in him. And the same is true with our doubts and our questions. He met Thomas in his doubts, and he meets us in ours as well. But what comes next, in my opinion, is what Thomas should be remembered for. After seeing his hands and his side, Thomas declared, "My Lord and my God." Thomas, who is known for his doubting, is the first person in the New Testament to call Jesus God. Let that sink in. The most famous doubter in the New Testament makes the most bold declaration about Jesus. This boldness by Thomas really shouldn't be shocking, though. In John 11, it was Thomas who spoke up amongst the disciples and said, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Him referring to Jesus. Thomas made two of the boldest statements that any of Jesus' disciples ever made in the Gospels. In my opinion, Thomas should be remembered for his declaration, not his doubt. Thomas was a man who was simply honest with his questions and his doubts. But did that make him faithless? No, it didn't make him faithless. Maybe remembering Thomas today can give us a healthier definition of faith. See, faith isn't certainty, rather it's faithfulness in the midst of questions and doubts. In this Advent season, we're called to long for the second advent of Jesus as we remember the first advent of Jesus. Believing in the child born in the manger 2,000 years ago at Christmas to be fully God and fully man, that he lived a perfect life, that he hung on the cross, and that on that cross he took my sins upon him, and that he fully died and 3 days later walked out of a tomb, and then 40 days later ascended into heaven. Those are huge claims. That can be hard to believe in. I get that. You know who else gets that? God gets that. God's not asking you to prove it. He's asking you to place your faith in it. Faith is a choice. You choose to place your faith in the first advent of Jesus being true and the second advent of Jesus coming to fruition. Faith is choosing to believe. It's choosing to believe it's true, despite the fact you can't prove it, because if you could prove it, it wouldn't be what? Faith. Faith is choosing to live your life according to the first and second advents of Jesus. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take some time today to write out some of your doubts, some of your questions. Don't write them in shame. Write them down boldly and honestly. Ask the Holy Spirit to reveal them to you. You might not even be aware right now what they are. Then take some time to bring your doubts to Jesus. Don't sugarcoat them. He already knows. And he's not mad at you for them. Jesus didn't shame Thomas for his doubts. He revealed himself to him in his doubt. Tell him your doubts and ask him to reveal himself to you in the midst of your doubts. Finally, instead of certainty being your goal, make faithfulness your goal. I'm sure Thomas had more questions for Jesus for the rest of his life, but in faith, he lived a life that said of Jesus, my Lord and my God. According to church history, Thomas would go on and take the gospel to India, which is roughly 2,800 miles from Jerusalem. That's further than going coast to coast in the United States. And he didn't have the luxury of trains, planes, and automobiles. There are 24 million Christians in India today. I'm not saying all 24 million Christians in India have Thomas to thank for their faith, but he was the first to take the seed of the gospel there. In India to this day, Thomas isn't known as Doubting Thomas. Rather, he is known for his faithfulness. On this day, as we approach December 25th, let's join Thomas in his faithfulness as we remember the birth of Jesus, and let's declare with our mouths and with our lives, my Lord and my God.